Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how I made this mixed media collage of an octopus. If you watched my bird videos, my mixed media collage bird videos, these are similar but not exactly the same. I'm using a few different techniques to change it up a bit. So if you are interested in seeing how I did this, stick around. Okay, so the first thing I do need to address is the fact that for some reason, the first minute or so of my video got destroyed. So I just went ahead and started right here. All you really missed was me putting down some paint on the canvas. I used a little bit of yellow ochre, titanium white, and I think just the craft paint pink, just to create a mottled background. So that's the only part that you missed, which is why we're starting here with a colored canvas. I'm using a canvas that is 8 inches by 8 inches, and I got it at Michael's. It's an artist loft canvas. And what I'm doing right now is using some of the gel prints that I've made in previous videos. If you watched any of my previous videos, you will most likely recognize these. And I'm speeding the process up so it doesn't carry on too long, but you can see what's going on here. So what I'm doing is just randomly cutting and tearing pieces of that print that I made. And I'm using gel matte medium as my adhesive on there, and I'm just brushing it on and then smoothing it over with my old Michael's gift card just to make sure that there are no air bubbles or pockets, because that can create damage to the piece at a later time. Now I picked a few various prints that I thought I would like to start with, and when you're working intuitively, which basically just means without a plan and going with what you feel, anything can change at any time. So some of these poke through at the end, but most of them actually do get covered up either with other pieces or with paint when I go over it. So I'm just filling up the space on the canvas, which is a pretty good way to get started with a mixed media or any kind of intuitive piece, or even a non-abstract piece, because sometimes a blank white canvas can be really intimidating, and it's important to just get something down there. Everything's going to end up being covered up anyway, not necessarily on this piece, but if you choose it to. So honestly, my best advice to you is to just start, get something down on that canvas, and then you can kind of just go from there. At this point, I have my base layer of papers collaged down, and I'm going in with a little bit of Payne's Gray, which I mixed with a little bit of the gel matte medium just to make the color a little more translucent, because I wanted to make sure not to lose too much of that pattern in the background, because that's what I really loved. Here I'm just going in to brighten it up a little bit with my fluorescent pink Liquitex Basics acrylic paint. These pieces, the whimsical pieces that I've been doing, I just feel like the bright colors really lend themselves well to this style. I mean, you definitely could use more muted or solemn colors if you wanted, but I'm going for a certain feel here, and this pink brightens things up immediately, so you'll notice that I use it a lot in my pieces. Here I'm adding some Artist Loft teal just to change the color up a little bit. It works nicely with the fluorescent pink and just kind of gives another level of brightness to the piece. Once I get some of that down on the canvas, I kind of decide that it needs something just a little bit warmer to give it kind of a glow. So you'll see here in a minute that I'm going to go in with a little bit of the Artist Loft green gold, and that's really going to kind of brighten everything up. Before I do that though, I do go in with a few other colors just to kind of change things, give it a little bit of variation in places. And one thing that I do is take the back of my paintbrush and kind of carve into the paint, if you will, like I'm doing right here, and it's adding some dimension and just a linear quality. I've got those squares, which are, you know, straight and narrow by their very definition, and I like the lines that kind of mimic that shape. And that's what I'm going in and doing here, just kind of creating more squares and more lines to bring the piece together. Here's where I come in with the green gold to warm everything up a bit. And it's such a translucent color that it kind of just gives a glow to anything you put it over. You wouldn't typically think of putting a green color over top of the fluorescent pink, but it doesn't create anything muddy. I think it just kind of adds a little bit of warmth to the areas where I felt it needed it, because I had a pretty cool palette going on before that with the blue, pink, and the teal and the blue itself. So here I'm going in with a Posca pen, which is just an acrylic marker. These are really great. I highly recommend you try them if you haven't. This brand is a little on the pricey side, but I believe Michaels sells an Artist's Loft brand or another store brand that is less expensive. And honestly, it's acrylic paint in marker form, so I don't necessarily think that the brand is going to really matter a whole lot if you just wanted to try them out before you bought a good set. I use these for so much, but here I'm just going in to add some outlines to some of the areas that I want to stand out. I'm going in and repeating some marks. I'm adding in some dots and some circles, as you'll see here in a moment. And here I'm really working on quality of line. You can see that some of the lines that I have going around the different areas are a little thicker and some are a little thinner. I'm adding ink or paint to areas to make them stand out. This is just a line quality that I use in a lot of my pieces, and I've said before, but I will mention again here, if you are an artist that's looking to show a body of work together, in my opinion, it's important to have some sort of continuity to your body of work so that it makes sense to be shown as a whole. And this is a way that I do that. I use line quality in my pieces to kind of carry one over to the next so that when you look at my work, you know that it is mine. Okay, so here's where I introduce the octopus. This is a drawing that I did a long time ago that, as you can see, I haven't finished. I used an aquarelle pencil for this, which is just a watercolor pencil. When you draw it on, you can see the lines there are just regular pencil lines, but then you go in with a brush and some water and it turns into like a nice watercolor feel. These are really great and I would highly recommend you try them. They're not very expensive, just play around with them and you can get a really cool feel to your work. But anyway, I started this a long time ago and like I said, haven't finished it. But he's going to be my inspiration piece for the octopus that I'm going to put on this canvas. So I'm just using it as a reference. I'm not going to be drawing the exact same thing. I just wanted something there because I really like the composition that I had with that, and I kind of want to get something similar onto the canvas. So now that I've decided on the final orientation of the canvas, it's time to get started drawing the octopus on top of the design that I already made, and that's what I'm about to do. So what I'm using here is a Conti crayon, a Conti pencil. I'm using it just because it's a light color. It's not going to be something that stands out if I choose not to outline the piece in the end, but it's going to be just enough of a indication on the canvas as to where the octopus is so that I know where to apply the adhesive for my next step. So I went ahead and sped up this process because it does take a little bit of time to sketch something out. So that's all I'm doing right now is just getting the basic design down, and like I said before, this is not going to be an exact match to the drawing on the right. It's just a reference photo so that I can kind of just keep in mind what I'm doing. And you'll notice in a few different places here that I have to stop and count legs because if you've ever drawn an octopus, that is not something that you are going for photorealistic off of an actual photo reference of a real animal. It can, like, there are a lot of legs and you can start to get really confused as to how many you actually have. So, you know, if you do want to have 8 legs on your octopus, which, I mean, hey, it's your world, but for this purpose I did, so I had to just keep stopping and counting legs. Now, I mentioned adhesive for the next step. So my thought process was going to be originally to collage book pages on with this guy, and I don't think that would have been a bad route. But what I ultimately ended up deciding was to go in with some metallic foil and use that to create the octopus. So what I'm using here is a little bit of foil adhesive. I'm going to show you right now. I picked this up at Michael's. It's Art Smart brand, and if you've never used this stuff, it can be very sticky. This is just a pen here that I'm showing you. It's an adhesive pen, so if you want something with, you know, a little more line work, you can use that. Now this applicator does have a very fine tip, but the reason why I'm squeezing some out on the plate is that it's going to lay down a bead if you use the applicator, and I don't want something that thick and puffy on the canvas. So what I'm doing is just squeezing a little bit out onto a paper plate, and then I'm going to use a paintbrush, an older paintbrush that I don't care that much about, to apply the adhesive directly to the canvas. Now how this works is you will apply the adhesive wherever you want it, and then it's best to let it cure for, I think it says a half an hour on the bottle, but I usually let it go an hour just to make sure everything is good. And I'm going back and forth between the brush in the large areas, and I'm using the pen for the smaller areas and to outline the tentacles just to make sure it's not going to be messy, because wherever you put this down, the foil is going to stick. So you want to make sure you only have it where you want it. Here I've got my foil ready to go, and I'm just laying sheets of it down. It's going to instantly cling to the piece. So, I mean, this is not a forgiving process at all. It's there when it's there, and you won't be able to really remove it unless you would go in with like a sandpaper or something, but then you're going to end up losing, damaging the piece underneath. So just kind of make sure you've got everything where you want it from the first go at it, because it kind of just has to be just so. So I scraped off or brushed off with a stiff bristled brush the excess to reveal the octopus underneath, and I'm just sprinkling the leftover crumbs on some of the other areas to make sure I'm getting all of the coverage that I want. And there are still a few pieces that didn't quite get as much, so I'm just going to lay down some foil and press on top, and it's going to cover all of the areas where the adhesive was. Once everything is on, I'm just using the stiff bristled brush to go over and make sure everything is cleaned off. So at this point, I decided that he needed to be outlined, because while it's very obvious on the canvas when the light is hitting it and you can really get a good shine off of the metal, when you were looking at it from a side angle or in no light, you couldn't really see what was going on. So I decided to take my white Posca pen and outline the whole entire piece, and that definitely helped, but you'll see here in a few minutes that it didn't really work exactly the way that I wanted it to. So I thought that outlining it with the black acrylic pen would help, and it did. And you'll see this in a moment. And that's a tip that I want to give you, and probably some of you already know this, but if you're trying to make text or an object stand out against a pretty busy background, if you outline it in white and then in black, you're going to get the effect that you want. It's going to be much more visible, and you will see here in a minute when I get the black ink down what I mean. Okay, here I am going in with the black, and you can already tell as soon as it hits the canvas next to the white that it's starting to stand out much better. So I just go ahead and outline the entire piece with the black, and I skipped ahead so you wouldn't have to watch the tedium of that. But you can definitely see there, I mean, look on the left where it's finished, how much more it stands out than what's over on the right-hand side with just the white. So I'm going to go ahead and finish outlining this whole piece. And then off camera, I decided that it needed thickened up, some of the lines needed thickened up in different places, so I went ahead and did that for you. And when we come back in, I'm going to show you what I ended up with. I will say one thing, when you've got a piece that has so much line work and so many small details like this, it's important to check the whole piece over and make sure you didn't miss anything, because I did a few times, and I'm really glad that I took the extra minute to go back and check everything out. When I'm happy enough that everything is complete, I went ahead and signed the piece, and then just inspected it even more closely just to make sure. But here is the finished piece. This is after I went in and thickened some of the lines. And I'm just taking you in to show you top to bottom what he looks like. I'm really happy with the way this piece turned out. These mixed media collage pieces are so much fun, especially when you've got a whimsical subject matter. It just really is a ton of fun to make, a lot of fun to look at. And here's the finished product. So thank you all so much for coming along with me on this journey. I hope this inspires you to make something of your own and just have fun with it. But anyway, thank you so much for stopping by. If you liked what you saw, give me a like, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe to my channel for more content. This piece will be available in my Etsy store as well as all of my others, so check out the link in the description. Take care and have a great day.